optimize Genesis sequence.
So, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining me here in my talk about internationalization puzzles. So, my name is Martijn van Iersel, and I work as a solution architect at TOPdesk. And I'm generally interested in a little bit about me. I'm interested in games, computers. I organize game jams. I make games. I'm interested in education, and I give trainings. And I always try to gamify those trainings, as you'll see in a moment. And I have a background in biology. I studied bioinformatics. At TOPdesk, I'm responsible for the internal training program for developers. And so we give all kinds of internal workshops about databases, about accessibility, about front-end development. And there's also one about internationalization. So here you see a screen cap of the description on our internal or on our intranet. It's a workshop about internationalization. And so why am I telling you about this? Well, basically I made it really complicated for myself because I'm trying to tell you 3 different stories at the same time. First of all, I want to tell you about this workshop, which I think is very cool. I want to share with you how I designed it and how it was created. And then secondly, I'm going to talk to you about some internationalization problems. And I'm going to show you some Java code and some of the common pitfalls that you can fall into with your Java code. And then finally, if you like programming puzzles, I'm going to invite you to try them out for yourself, because I've put it all online, publicly available. So that's the structure of this talk. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the design of workshops. Then I'm going to do some deep dive into the puzzles and show you some internationalization Java code. And then finally, I'm going to tell you how you can try it all for yourself. So when talking about workshop design, so at TOPdesk we have a learning and development group, and they have a training for trainers. And I followed this training, and in this training they will tell you when you design a workshop, you have to be able to, or you have to think about 4 questions: why, who, how, and what. So when you think about why do you even want to do a workshop, why do you even want to create a workshop, you have to think about what kind of change you want to create within the organization as a result of your workshop. This is what they also call in learning development terms, they call this the performance objective. So what do you want to achieve within the organization with your workshop? And in this case, well, thinking about internationalization, you can think about everything that can go wrong with internationalization. For example, translation issues. This is an actual dialogue so in the American version of Windows, it says compressed to zip file. But in the British version, for a while at least, it says compressed to postcode file. So something went wrong, something was lost in translation there. Time zone issues. Something went wrong, there was an issue in the calculation of the last day since the last time zone issue. Encoding issues can be embarrassing, especially if they happen on a large screen in a live-streamed event in a debate between the president and the leader of the opposition. And I really love this example. I found this on Wikipedia. It's like somebody, look, if you can see the envelope, somebody tried to, or somebody sent a letter from France to an address in Russia, but they received the address on a French system that couldn't display the Cyrillic characters properly. But they faithfully copied all the accented letters on the envelope anyway, and created a puzzle for the Moscow post office to solve. And the letter was delivered properly anyway, so kudos to that. That's another internationalization puzzle. Here's an example from our own lovely TOPdesk cantina in our head office in Delft in the Netherlands. And we always have delicious lunches there. And they wrote from AM 11:45 to 13:15. So they, halfway through, they switched from 12-hour notation to 24-hour notation. Anybody in the audience from Chile, perhaps? No, that's a small challenge. No. So in Chile, I really like to hear some first-hand accounts from about this. But in Chile, they have a love-hate relationship with daylight savings time. And in this case, they decided to extend daylight savings time by 1 week. And they announced that 3 weeks before it happened. And so you can imagine the chaos that causes. You know, even if you manage to get all the software updated in time, you still have database records like flights departing from different countries that don't change their daylight savings time. Those records are already stored in the database. And so, yeah, people at the airport, they had to write, they give your boarding passes, they had to write them manually because the system was all wide open. Paper sizes can be different. This is something that developers in Europe are often not aware of, but during the keynote, Gregor Hope already talked a lot about paper sizes, so I'll skip that. And but yesterday there was a talk by Mahmoud about daytime, and at a certain point the audience asked the question like, is there any hope? But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I really love those things, like these tiny little bugs that you get to fix. And if you guys remember this scene from Pulp Fiction, where two gangsters are talking. So Vincent Vega here is just returned from Amsterdam, and they're talking about all the tiny little differences between Europe and Amsterdam, or Amsterdam and the United States. And so when Quentin Tarantino wrote this script, he actually spent a year in Amsterdam just before that. So he's speaking from his own experience here. And what Vincent Vega then claims is like, oh, I just love those tiny little differences. And that's what I love about it as well. But coming back to the workshop design, the thing that I mainly want to achieve, I don't want to tell people like, okay, just use UTC everywhere and then all your problems will be solved. I want the developers at TOPdesk to be able to handle these problems with confidence, right? So that you have a little bit experience in the bag, so that you can know how to solve these problems. So not just changing stuff and seeing what happens, or pretending you know what you're doing, or just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. It's okay to copy stuff from Stack Overflow, but you have to understand what you're doing, right? That's the point. Or here's my personal contribution to the series, letting ChatGPT do all your thinking. Over the summer, we had some summer interns join TOPdesk. And I swear, I mean, if you look at students, then you can see the future, basically. And they were asking ChatGPT everything. And, sometimes it works, but you have to be careful, because if you are confused about a problem, and then you ask ChatGPT about it, now there are two entities that are confused about the problem, right? It's like ChatGPT doesn't have the information about the problem that it needs to solve it. So, coming back to it, the performance objective is to give developers at TOPdesk the confidence to solve these internationalization issues. Second question that you have to answer during workshop design is, who is it for? Right, this is often overlooked, but it actually matters, and I'll show you why. So, who is the workshop for? What is your target audience? Well, in this case, that's simple. It's an internal workshop, so it's for TOPdesk programmers. The group size is 10 to 15 people, because that's just the rate that we hire new programmers. Any prior knowledge? Well, that's actually difficult because we hire both junior programmers and senior programmers. So if you design a workshop, you have to make something that fits both. Any particular likes and dislikes? Well, programmers generally love problem solving. And of course, that's also part of the selection process at TOPdesk. So, you end up with a whole bunch of people that love problem solving. To illustrate, who has heard the phrase nerd sniping? Just raise your hand if you've heard it before. Who hasn't? Oh, that's also, yeah, okay. So I will take you through it. I actually saw it in the slides of Brian Guts during the keynote. So it is something that clearly has traction, but it came from this XKCD comic. So XKCD by Randall Moreau is always a source of geeky lore. And it starts like this. So there's this, there's a lot of text here. I'm just going to talk you through it, right? So don't try to read all of it. But it's the guy in the hat that says, there's a certain type of mind that's easily distracted by problems. And that's why I invented this sport, nerd sniping. And, okay, do you see this physicist crossing the road? And then he holds up a sign with a physics problem. And the physicist goes like, interesting. Maybe you could try this, maybe you could try that. Completely ignoring his surroundings, and then getting run over by a big truck. And then he ends up saying, like, physicists are 2 points, mathematicians 3, and I wonder how many points programmers are then. Maybe 5 points, or maybe 16, And so this phrase, it really resonates with people, and that's why I think it gained traction. That nerd sniping is people getting easily or diving deep into problems because they're just interested in them. So that's why I want to talk about the advent of code. So this is a bit of a digression, but I promise that there's a point to it. Who here has heard of the advent of code? Just raise your hand. Oh, that's quite a lot. Like almost everyone. Who has participated in the advent of code? Oh, I think a third of the audience. That's very nice. So then, but for those who haven't, I will still explain what it is. So advent of code is like an advent calendar. So in an advent calendar, in the days leading up to Christmas, you open up a door every day and you get a little present, like a chocolate or something like that. But with the advent of code, instead of a chocolate, you get a programming puzzle. And I'll show you an example briefly. So also, again, don't try to read everything. There's just this big block in the middle that is the input you get. And you have to imagine that this is a forest. So every hash is a tree, and every period is empty space. And then you have to make this diagonal path through it. You have walked through it, and the question is then, count how many times you run into a tree, right? And it's a very simple problem. You can solve it with a program like this, very short program. I'm not going to go through it. And so, this has been going, the advent of code has been, one thing is that the days leading up to Christmas, it gets harder and harder and harder because this is quite a simple problem that you can solve in a short amount of time. But just before Christmas, it gets really hard, and sometimes it takes hours and hours and hours to solve it. And at TOPdesk, it's quite popular. So every year, there is a large group of people at TOPdesk trying to solve all the problems. And so you can see here our private leaderboard that we have. And you can see I can highlight some names, like for example, Walter Smith, our CEO, he's CEO of a 1,000-person company, but he's still geek enough to enjoy doing these puzzles. I hear that he's now backfilling the earlier years in Rust. And Benno Richters, the head of the development department. It's really something that's alive and well in TOPdesk. And I thought I can make use of that in my workshop design. So then the question is, how? How are you going to deliver knowledge during the workshop? So I'm going to make use of this love for puzzle solving. Because when you teach, you really want to avoid just dumping a whole lot of information on people, right? Just like in the traditional classroom setting, just dumping a lot of information, and people go like, yeah, but why do I really need to know this? Instead, you want to get people in problem-solving mode, right? Give them a problem to work on, and then go like, to solve this, I'm lacking some knowledge here. And then people, it's like a hook in your brain. People are receptive to actually gain that knowledge. And that's when learning happens, right? So that's why I created puzzles. I created a set of 9 puzzles, and they're now publicly available at i18npuzzles.com. I18n, of course, because internationalization is a very long word, and we can abbreviate by taking the I and then 18 letters and then n. That's how it works. And to give you an example, here's the first puzzle. You get a whole list of messages in different languages. There's some Hungarian and some French and some Russian and some Swedish. And the question is asked, like, for each of these messages, can you tell me if they fit within the SMS limit of 160 bytes? And do they fit within the tweet limit of 100 characters? Because the SMS system was designed early on during the first development of mobile networks, and it was really a bandwidth limitation, right? So that's why they set a limit on the number of bytes, because it was really restricted in bandwidth. For the early tweet messages, the limit was 140 characters, but that was for stylistic reasons, right? They wanted people not to write very long, well-reasoned arguments, but very short, to maximize misunderstanding, you know, short messages. And so in order to solve this problem, you need to understand the differences between bytes and characters. That's the point of the puzzle. So I will give you the solution to this puzzle a few slides later. So, but first I'm going to talk about why the advent of code design is so great. Because first of all, with the advent of code puzzles, you start with a very large input. And this large input, it helps because it forces you to write a program. If the input was very small, then you could potentially solve it by hand, right? But since we are training programmers, we want them to program, and that's why the input has to be large. And the output is very short. Usually it's a unique number or something like that, or a short string that is then checked. And that allows us to give immediate feedback on whether you got the program right or not. Like you don't have to wait for immediate feedback is very advantageous for learning. You don't have to wait weeks for somebody to review a program and tell you if it's correct or not. You immediately know if you did it right or wrong. It also gives you flexibility in which programming language you use, because ultimately it doesn't matter how you wrote the program as long as you got the result correct. It also means that it's self-paced, and that's handy because, as I told you earlier, there's a mix of junior and senior developers participating, and then everybody can just work on their own pace. You know, if you are senior, you can breeze through it, and you know, if you're a junior, you can take all the time you need to learn everything. And there's a competitive element to it. People can compare their progress. I also created this leaderboard, and people can see how far they got. So the final question that you have to answer when you design a workshop is, what are you actually teaching? Right? More detailed, what is the contents? And so usually you do that by writing down learning objectives. And in this case, I made 9 puzzles, and for each puzzle, I made separate learning objectives. So each puzzle has like a lesson in it. And so for the first puzzle that I just showed you, is to understand the difference between characters and bytes. So, now I'm going to dive into the puzzles. I'm going to explain more about the actual problems. Because to know how characters and bytes relate to each other, you have to realize there are a lot of characters in the world. Just look at these road signs. It's from Japan, Morocco, Bulgaria, Poland. There's a lot of characters in the world. And how many bytes do you need to encode all those characters, right? When they started with computing, we started with the ASCII table. We just used 7 bits, which gives you room for 128 characters. So that's enough for uppercase, lowercase letters, digits, and some punctuation. Well, computers aren't 7 bits; they are 8 bits. So a byte is 8 bits. So we can fill up the extra space using and use that for accented characters, like for French and for German. But even this isn't even enough for some Eastern European languages. They already use a different code page. So this clearly wasn't going to be sufficient. And that's when Unicode arrived. In 1991, Unicode 1.0, with the promise to encode every language in the world. Right? How great is that? How often do we see that people have actually one standard that everyone follows? Right? So often that it's all these competing standards. So the promise of Unicode was great, and it had Russian in its Cyrillic, Greek alphabet, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and but it was also at the same time it was clear that it wasn't going to be enough, 16 bits. There's still, I mean, it was only a simplified version of Chinese that was included, and there was all these new fancy emojis that people wanted to add. So they extended it further. This is the most recent release of Unicode, came out just a month ago, Unicode 16. Now we are up to 21 bits, which gives us room for a little over 1 million characters. And right now, about 150,000 of those are allocated. There's still room to grow, in fact, for 150 scripts. And these are the most recent emojis that have been added. So, by the way, emoji comes from, of course, from the Japanese moji, meaning character. So it has nothing to do with emotions, right? So don't even this new face that's been added, the face with bag under eyes, is something that, was an important addition that we can all relate to. So it's actually from the Japanese emoji. So here's an example of how Unicode encodes code points, and you can see that all the letters are there, but the letters are characters from different languages, and even something like the pile of poo emoji. So it's not just the poo emoji, right? It's the pile of poo. That's something that Unicode found important to specify. And it is then encoded by hexadecimal 1F4A9, which we'll come back to. So now, in order to solve the puzzle, now we understand the difference between bytes and characters. And here's an example. If I take the phrase Sacré-Cœur, and then you can see that you can see all the code points to encode these symbols. And then below it, you see the bytes. And you see that often in UTF-8 encoding, a letter is just 1 byte, but sometimes it's 2. And basically, this is how it works. So in particular ranges from the Unicode table, the bits basically get spread around over multiple bytes. So sometimes it's 1, sometimes 2, 3, 4. It can even go on, but as I mentioned, Unicode goes to up to 21 bits. And then here's the solution of the first puzzle. You can see for example, if you look at the third sentence, which is in Cyrillic, then you can see that it fits within the tweet limit because it's less than 140 characters. but it's not each Cyrillic character, most of them take 2 bytes, so it goes way over the SMS limit. And here's a Java program that you can use, so I highlighted just the most important lines of code in the solution. And what you do is you first read all the lines from the file, specifying that it's in UTF-8 encoding. And then you can check the number of bytes. So from that line, you can then get the bytes. And again, you have to specify UTF-8 encoding. And isn't it weird that you have to specify that UTF encoding twice? Like, why is that? Right? Isn't that weird? Well, it's because Java's internal string representation is actually UTF-16. Java came very shortly after the release of Unicode 1.0, and they really bought into this idea that we would encode all the characters in just 16 bits. So they jumped on that, and that might have been a mistake. So in order to get the bytes out, then we have to take that internal string representation and then go again to UTF-8, and then we can count the bytes. And then finally, we can check the length in characters just using the length method. And is that going to work? Well, in this puzzle it works. But there's another puzzle where that won't work. And that's, well, I'm jumping now to the 5th puzzle, which goes more into this problem. And it's, this is the puzzle input you get. You basically get a map of a dog park where you walk your dog, right? And there are things in there that, there are things in there like bushes and trees and dogs and even a rabbit. But there's also a lot of dog poo. And so these are represented by different emojis. And you have to walk through the park diagonally. And the question is asked, how often do you step in the poo? So you can recognize the similarity with the Advent of Code puzzle I showed earlier. But there's a twist to it, because as I showed you earlier, the hexadecimal for the poo emoji is 1F4A9. That's not 16 bits. That's 17 or 20 if you round to the nearest nibble. So how do you fit 17 bits when you only have 16 bits of space? Well, just like as with UTF-8, you have to spread the bits around. And here you see how that's done. And then you end up with something that's called a surrogate pair. Right, so two code points basically, that basically is supposed to be 1. Now, always when I make a puzzle like that, before I make it official, I first let a few colleagues try it out. So my good colleague Joep helped me out here, and he tried out the puzzle for me. And he came back to me and he said, "Martijn, your puzzle's not working." And then when it's not working, there's 2 possibilities. I made a mistake in the puzzle. Would never happen, of course. Or he fell into the trap that I carefully laid in the puzzle. Because this is the code he wrote, right? He used line.codePointAt position. And that doesn't work in this case, because suppose that we are at the 4th position here. What you want to do is look in the top rows and find the 4th position, zero-based indexing. Find the 4th position, and then you find your poop emoji. But what actually happens is that CodePointAt looks at the 4th byte and then tries to determine what code point is there. So CodePointAt is smart enough to understand that if there's a surrogate pair, it needs to combine the 2. But the indexing, it still gets it wrong. What you have to do to solve this problem is instead you have to turn the line into a stream of code points, which is less efficient because you have to walk through the entire stream. If it's a large string, then that definitely causes problems. But it's the only way to solve it. And so you just turn it into a stream of code points, then you skip the right number, and then you arrive at the correct answer. Now, okay, so a very different topic is coming up now. I'm going to talk about the next puzzle, which is about time. And I made it about detecting gravitational waves. You think like, what do programmers know about gravitational waves, right? Why not something more down to earth, like flight scheduling or train scheduling, or something like maybe organizing an online meeting with people in different time zones? No, none of that, because I want people to think about the universal truth behind time zones. So this is how the puzzle works. You have, in order to detect gravitational waves, you have super sensitive measuring equipment. So you have measuring stations all around the world, and they have to. So this equipment is so sensitive that it can be set off by a minor earthquake, or even by a heavy truck just passing by, right? So the only way to be sure that they've really detected something is to check against all the different stations around the world that they have detected something at the same time. Now, this process is very complicated, and I think dealing with time zone issues is probably the least complicated aspect of detecting gravitational waves, but it's the aspect that I'm focusing on now. So in order to solve this problem, so you get a long input with, let's say, detection events, and you have to find out when they are matching. And so in order to solve that, basically you have to take all the local times and convert them to UTC instance. And so UTC is basically, it isn't a time zone. UTC is the absence of a time zone. It's universal. And so here's some Java code. Sorry for putting so much code on the screen. I'm just going to highlight the most important thing, because basically the Java instant class does all the work for you. If you have correctly formatted timestamps, which you have in this puzzle, all you have to do is parse them into an instant. And then all you have to do next is just group them together, and then you have your answer. And so the important thing that I want to teach here is that time zones aren't, so instances are universal, UTC is universal, and time zones are just like a representation, or a way to represent that instant from a local perspective. So it's basically like time zones don't exist. Time zones are just like your opinion, man. So the final puzzle is the audit trail fixer. And that's actually inspired by a real bug that we had in TOPdesk. So, and the problem is that, in TOPdesk registers incidents, and these incidents, they can go through various phases. Like at start they're created, and then they can be in progress, they can be on hold, they can go back into progress again, and then they can be completed. And so the problem we had, so this trail of events, that's called the audit trail, and that people used that to make reports. And the problem we had is that we noticed that some of the durations were wrong. So the question is, can we fix that for our customers? And so, for instance, we figured that the duration actually should have been like this, and we knew how long it was. Right, we knew that it was, this was the wrong duration, so we have to subtract that. And this is the correct duration, so we add that. And then the question is, can we fix the timestamps that come after? The problem is that the timestamps were stored as local times with UTC offsets. And that makes it hard to calculate with them. Because if you have UTC offsets are not time zones, and that's basically the lesson of this puzzle. Because if you start with a particular time zone, let's say we have a timestamp from Santiago, Chile. And then we know that this is summer in Santiago, so we know that then the offset is 3 hours, so we have to add 3 hours to get at the UTC instant. And then let's say we have to fix the audit trail by 3 months. So we add 3 months, and we have our another UTC instant. And that calculation is easy. You can, if you use the right library. And then we've arrived in wintertime in Chile, but that's okay. So now to go back to the local time, we know we have to subtract 4 hours. If we only have the UTC offset though, we can't do this. Because we start with the local time, it has a UTC offset of -3. So we add 3 hours to reach UTC. We can add 3 months, so far so good. But now, do we go back 3 hours or 4 hours? I mean, if you know where it was, and if you know which time zone it was, you can know this, but we only have the UTC offset, right? So that's a problem in this case. So the actual puzzle is like this. You get a long list of timestamps, and you're told that they are either from Santiago or from Halifax in Canada. And both of these are in a time zone that can be either -3 or -4. But -3 in Halifax is in the northern hemisphere summer, and -3 in Chile is in the southern hemisphere summer. So they're nicely swapping around. And your job now is to find out which time zone each timestamp is from. And the way you do that is as follows. So there's another bit of Java code. And this is a beautiful example because this allows you to take the 2 greatest classes of the Java util time package and see how they work. Because we've got zone datetime and we've got instant. Instant we already met before. And basically, what we're going to do is zone datetime allows you to store both times with a UTC offset and with an actual proper IANA time zone. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to take the original time with offset, convert it to an instant, and then map it through both different time zones. So we're going to assume it's one time zone and we assume it's the other time zone, and check the new offset we get and see if it's the same as the original one. So here's that explained again in the diagram. We're taking the original input and put that in a zone datetime with the particular offset. The input already has the offset, so we know that that is correct. We convert that to a UTC instant, and then we convert it back to a zone datetime, assuming both possible time zones. So then we just check what the offset would be in each of these time zones and see which one matches the original. And then we figured out which time zone it is. This was the last puzzle that I'm talking through. If you like this, if you like puzzles, if you like programming puzzles, then I have news for you, because I'm going to publish more. I have now a series of 9, and I want to extend it up to a full set of 24 puzzles. I'm still working on it, so I hope I can achieve it. I've got great respect for Eric Wassel, who has to do this every year, and it's a lot of work. I'm going to do this in March. And why March? Well, I can't do it in December because then everybody's doing that in the code, right? And I thought, what is a good month that has something to do with internationalization? I think March is the best month because if I publish the puzzle every day at 12 UTC, then it means that in Europe they will arrive at either 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and in the US they will arrive either at 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning. So that means that knowing when your puzzle is going to arrive will be the first puzzle of the event. And so, yeah, so please put it in your calendar if you're interested. You can go to the website right now. So the website is i18andpuzzle.com. If you scan this code, it brings you there. And you can do it right now. Perhaps you'd like to try it yourself, or maybe at your company you would like to do a similar training. That's fine. Go ahead and use it. And if you like to see more puzzles, then join me in March. You can contact me by email. I'm also setting up a Discord server if you want to hang out and chat about this. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. So thank you for your attention. I see that I'm making good time. So there's also time for questions if you want. So, any questions? Oh, yeah, there.
Did you ever have to decrease the difficulty of the puzzles for the trainees?
Okay, so the question was if I had to decrease the difficulty of the puzzles for the trainees. Yes, a little bit. So, yes, I've done the workshop now 3 times, and it is hard to judge initially how long juniors will take with it, and so there are puzzles where people spend a lot more time parsing the input than that they actually spent on the aspect that I wanted them to learn, and so I just made the parsing simpler for that puzzle. Yeah. But the new ones that I'm going to add, I want to make them more difficult, because now I'm letting go kind of the training goal, and now it's more like just a fun puzzle event. Yeah.
You've mentioned workshops a couple of times, and in these workshops, do you start out with the theoretical part that covers potentially what might be needed for the solution, or do you integrate that part into the puzzles themselves?
Okay. Yeah. So the question is, do I start with some theoretical part and then, or do I mix it together,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I've iterated on the format, and in the beginning it was really like starting with some theoretical part and then doing puzzles, and now I'm more. So I think the most recent workshop that I did, basically I asked people to prepare by doing the first puzzle. Then we talk through the puzzle, and I give them some theoretical part, and I also explain some TOPdesk specific systems, like for example how translations are organized internally at TOPdesk, which is not something that's part of these puzzles. And then basically we alternate between some theoretical explanation and then doing a puzzle, and I give people actually time to work in pairs on puzzles, because I think if you work in pairs, that also helps people to learn from each other. There's a question?
So first of all, thank you so much for your talk. I think being a software engineer and being passionate about education, your talk is best of both worlds.
Thank you.
My question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you developed those puzzles for the developers internally at TOPdesk, right?
Yeah.
So doing those puzzles, is it within the official working hours, or is it like an extra time?
Okay. Yeah, so your question is if people actually do the puzzles during official working time, or if they have to do it as homework, let's say. No, it's during the official working hours. And so for the whole training program, I mean, this is just one training of the whole training program, that people get plenty of time to upgrade their skills. At TOPdesk, we call that 10 to grow. You get 10% of your time to upgrade your skills. But this isn't even part of that. This is the official trainings that all first years have to go through. And so, that's part of normal working time. Yeah. All right. I don't see any more questions. So, thank you for your attention.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis sequence.